him a big applause. She now is one of 7 water keepers that we now have working around China. Almost all of them are fighting coal. I want to introduce another keeper who's we got in this area. Let me just read this because we got so many of them. But fighting coal in this area, we got the Willamette, we have the Tualatin, the Rogue River, the Klamath River keeper, the Columbia River keeper, the Cook Inlet keeper, the Spokane River keeper, the Puget Sound keeper, North Sound Bay keeper, the Coos Water keeper, and Lake Pend Oreille in Idaho. All of them are fighting coal plants or transfer stations in their areas. Now I'm going to bring up somebody else just to show you what he looks like. We have one of the leaders, the Canadian river keepers. We have about a whole lot of river water keepers in Canada, and this is Mark Madison, who's our first. Matson, who's our first. And he pioneered a lot of the laws in Canada, the Fisheries Act for suing the big polluters. But a couple of years ago, we used Canadian law, MMA, to sue Detroit Edison, which was a utility in Detroit that was burning coal. And the mercury from the coal was coming over and poisoning people in Canada. And when we sued them, they said the same thing that all the coal companies have been telling us for 30 years when we tell them, your mercury is poisoning our local people. They all say the same thing. They say, that mercury in the fish is not coming from our plants, it's coming from China. So, and this is what the industry says. And we now know that the fish in the Cascades, that the salmon in Portland and up and down the coast are contaminated. Every single salmon on the coast of the Northwest United States and in Vancouver has dangerous levels of mercury in its flesh. We now know by scientific proof that mercury is coming from Canada, from China. So why are we taking this coal, American coal, sending it over to China so that they can send us back the acid rain and that they can send us back the mercury to poison our fish? That's something we shouldn't be doing. But you can sit down now, Mark. I just wanted to see what you're looking for. Coal is crime. And I've been fighting the coal industry for 30 years. Now, a lot of the coal that you're going to see coming through here, if you let them get away with this crime, is going to come from the Powder River Basin, and it's going to come from up in Canada. The coal that I've been fighting has been mainly in Appalachia. And I'm going to tell you what I've seen in Appalachia. Because the same thing that happened to Appalachia is what's going to happen here if you let coal into your community. Because wherever coal comes, it's toxic. And it's toxic not just for adults. It's toxic for children, and it's toxic for our democracy, and it's toxic for all of the values that make America an exemplary nation. Coal is the enemy of our country, and it's the enemy of everything we stand for. And if you don't believe that, I tell you, go to West Virginia and see what it's like in coal country, where they don't have democracy anymore, literally. Where there's whole communities, coal says, well, we're bringing prosperity to the state. But just the opposite, which is what they'll tell you here. They'll say, oh yeah, if you let us bring the coal through here, we'll bring you jobs and we'll bring you prosperity. And that's a lie. And that's what they've told for 100 years. They've told the people of West Virginia. My father used to say about West Virginia, it's the richest state in the nation because of the value of the coal beneath the land. But it has the poorest people of any state except for Mississippi. Coal doesn't share its wealth. It keeps it for itself. And it makes a few people billionaires by impoverishing everybody else. And anybody who touches coal gets poisoned by it. And you don't just get sick. It poisons your democracy. It poisons your community. It poisons your values. What I would say to you is coal is crime. Do not let it come through this community because it's... of living near the railroad tracks. It's going to poison everybody it touches. It's going to poison your city council. It's going to poison your mayor. It's going to poison the state legislature. It's going to poison the governor, and it's going to poison your children, your groundwater, the air you breathe, and it's going to poison the whole and distort the whole economic system here. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in West Virginia, and I've seen in coal country in West Virginia. I've driven through 30 communities in West Virginia that were once thriving communities with union halls and with churches and with schools, and there's nothing left. The landscapes have been empty. The coal companies come in and they say, we're going to mine. We can't have you here because the explosions, because the dust. We don't want you. We're going to poison your water. We're going to poison your well. We don't want to pay you the damages, so we're just going to pay you to move. And when we pay you, you're going to sign a contract. And the contract says that you can never move back into this county again. And that's the contracts that they sign. So the people, you can drive through coal country in West Virginia to towns like Whitesville, and they're just the only thing left are boarded up union halls, boarded up homes, and boarded up churches and schools, etc. The agways are closed, the grocery stores are closed, there is no economy left. That is the legacy of coal, and it's the legacy of coal everywhere it goes. 2 years ago, I had a lawsuit in West Virginia, and I've been fighting the coal industry in that state for 3 decades. And I had a lawsuit in West Virginia, and we won the biggest judgment it's a 6.5-week jury trial. We won the biggest judgment in the history of the state. I went back about a year ago to appeal that judgment in front of the West Virginia Supreme Court, which incidentally is owned by the coal industry and which cut the judgment down to essentially nothing, so that the 8,000 people who had been poisoned got essentially nothing, and the lawyers hardly got paid. So, which I was also pissed at that. But as I was leaving the state, I was driving on a road it was like driving on a cushion or a skateboard park. It was smooth and it was nice, and this is unusual in West Virginia, because West Virginia, like I say, they don't put money into any infrastructure that doesn't benefit the coal industry. And I said to the driver, why is this road so smooth? And he said, because there's 22 inches of asphalt on this road. And every inch of asphalt costs the taxpayer millions of dollars per lane, per mile. And I knew why there was 22 inches of asphalt, because the coal trucks weigh 90,000 pounds. And they will pulverize a less robust road. But it's not the coal industry that's paying for that road. It's the people of the state, and it's the federal taxpayer. So when coal says that it's cheap and it's clean, we know they're lying when they say they're clean. But they're also lying when they say they're cheap. If they really had to internalize their costs, if they had to pay the true costs that they are charging to the rest of us, they would be the most catastrophically expensive way to boil a pot of water that's ever been devised. They could not compete in the fields of free market capitalism. The only way they compete is by subverting democracy, escaping the application of the law, and then winning themselves, corrupting the political process to bring in huge subsidies that allow them to compete against wind and solar in a marketplace with the appearance that they're actually competitive. They aren't. I'm building right now a solar thermal plant in Southern California, 2.7 gigawatts, the biggest power plant in our country. It costs $3 billion per gigawatt. It takes us 3 years to build. A coal plant takes 10 years. It'll cost $3 billion. It'll cost $3 billion a gigawatt to build. A coal plant costs $3 billion a gigawatt. Well, once you build our plant, it's free energy forever, because the photons are hitting the earth every day for free, and all we have to do is build the infrastructure to harvest them and put them in the line. Once you build that coal plant for the same $3 billion, now your big costs are just beginning, because now you got to go cut down the Appalachian Mountains, ship them across the country in the rails, warp the railroads, pulverize the roads, burn the coal, poison everybody in our country. Now, when I say that, I'm not exaggerating. Last August, the National Academy of Science released a 10-year report that said that every freshwater fish in America now has dangerous levels of mercury in its flesh. We are living every fish. And that mercury is coming primarily, about 85% of it, from coal-burning power plants. We are living in our country in a science fiction nightmare today, where my children and the children of most Americans can now no longer engage in the seminal, primal activity of American youth, which is to go fishing with their father or mother in the local fishing hole and then come home and safely eat the fish. Because the coal industry paid off the politicians, subverted our democracy, and got to poison us, which is illegal, and steal the commons, privatize the commons from the rest of us. According to CDC, 1 out of every 6 American women now has dangerous levels of mercury in her womb. And there are 640,000 children born in this country every year who've been exposed to levels of mercury high enough to lose them at least 1 IQ point permanently and subject them to a grim inventory of other diseases, including autism, blindness, mental retardation, heart, liver, and kidney disease. I spend a lot of time fishing, and I eat the fish. I got my mercury levels tested recently, and my levels are 10 times what EPA considers safe. I was told by Dr. David Carpenter, who's the national authority on mercury contamination, that a woman with my levels of mercury in her womb would have children with cognitive impairment, permanent brain damage. I said to him, "You mean she might have?" And he said, no, the science is very clear today. Her children would have some level of permanent neurological injury. Probably, he estimated, at my levels, a permanent IQ loss in those kids of 5 to 7 points. Well, today, according to CDC, there are 640,000 children born in this country every year who've been exposed to dangerous levels of mercury in their mother's wombs. And that is a cost of coal that they don't tell you about when they say, oh, it's only 11 cents a kilowatt hour. If you go home today and look at as George Bush called it, the Google, you can go to EPA's website and you can find about a half dozen peer-reviewed studies that are published on that website by the Harvard School of Public Health and others that say that ozone and particulates, which is another class of pollutants from coal-burning power plants, cost this country $345 billion annually in healthcare costs. We could pay for Obamacare half a dozen times over just by eliminating those 2 pollutants from coal-burning power plants. According to these publications, there are between 47 and 60,000 Americans who die every year from breathing ozone and particulates from those power plants. That's 20 times the number of people who were killed in the World Trade Center attacks, but not just once, year after year after year. I live, and that's 10 million asthma attacks, 1 million lost workdays. These are parts of the cost of coal that they don't tell you about when they say, oh, it's only 11 cents a kilowatt hour. They're not telling you that out of your other pocket every year, if a foreign enemy, a foreign nation, did to our country what the coal industry does to us every day, we would consider it an act of war. I live 2 hours south of the Adirondack Mountains. This is the oldest protected wilderness on the face of the earth. It's been protected as forever wild since 1888. We had a right, the American citizens, to believe that generations of our children would be able to enjoy those pristine landscapes unspoiled. But today, 1/5 of the lakes in the Adirondacks is sterilized from acid rain, which has also destroyed the forest cover on the high peaks of the Appalachians from Georgia all the way up into northern Quebec. These are private and public timber stands that have been destroyed by this industry. Those are part of the cost of coal to private landowners, the property damage, and to the public commons that they don't tell you about when they say, oh, it's only 11 cents a kilowatt hour. And there are many other costs. I'm not going to talk about the acidification of the ocean, which to me is the most frightening thing that I've ever thought of. Global warming, of course, the 550 toxic coal slag heaps that are sitting next to every coal-fired power plants in America that we know are causing cancer clusters in every place that they exist. When I flew out over the Appalachians the last time, over the Cumberland Plateau the last time after I argued this lawsuit, I saw something that if the American people could see it, there would be a revolution in our country. We are cutting down the Appalachian Mountains, the same as they're doing at the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. These sacred heritage, our Purple Mountains majesties, the amber waves of grain, that we celebrate as part of our nation. These historic landscapes where Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett roamed, where our culture, from NASCAR racing to bluegrass music, is rooted in those hills, and so much of American values, and we are literally cutting them down with giant machines that are called drag lines they're 22 stories high. I flew under one of them in a Piper Cub. They cost $500 million for a single machine. And they practically dispense with the need for human labor, which indeed is the point. When my father was fighting strip mining in Appalachia back in the 60s, I remember a conversation I had with him when I was 14 years old, where he said to me, they're not just destroying the environment, they're permanently impoverishing these communities, because there is no way that they can regenerate an economy from these barren moonscapes that are left behind. And he said they're doing it so they can break the unions. And that's exactly what they did. When he told me that, there were 151,000 unionized mine workers in West Virginia digging coal out of tunnels in the ground. Today, there are fewer than 14,000 miners left in the state. There are more people working in Walmart in West Virginia than in the coal industry. Fewer than half of them are unionized because the strip industry broke the UMW. And they're taking more coal out of West Virginia with 9 out of 10 workers fired. They're taking more coal out of West Virginia than they were in 1968. The only difference is that back then, at least some of that money was being left in the state for salaries and pensions and reinvestment in the community. Today, virtually all of it goes straight up to Wall Street, to the big banking houses that fund these operations, and to the out-of-state corporations that own all the coal in West Virginia. 95% of West Virginia coal is owned by Arch Coal, Peabody, you guys know these, Cloud Coal, Consol, Massey, just a handful of companies, and they own all the coal in West Virginia. And they are liquidating, and they don't live there, and they're liquidating the state for cash using these giant machines and 2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate explosives they detonate every day in the state. It's the equivalent of a Hiroshima bomb once a week. They're blowing the tops off the mountains to get at the coal seams beneath, and they take the rock, debris, and rubble. They scrape it into the adjacent river valley, and it's all illegal. You cannot in the United States, as any one of these 200 waterkeepers will tell you, you cannot in this country legally take rock and debris and dump it into a waterway without a Clean Water Act permit. And you can never get a permit to do such a thing. So we sued them, and we won the suit in front of a conservative Republican federal judge, Judge Charles Hayden. And Judge Hayden, well, wait a second, because this isn't a story with a happy ending. Judge Hayden said the same thing I did. He said, it's all illegal, it's been illegal since day one, and he enjoined all mountaintop mining. 2 days from when we got that decision, lobbyists for Massey Coal and Peabody Coal met in the back door of Gail Norton's Interior Department with her first deputy chief, Stephen J. Griles, who was a former lobbyist for Massey Coal and Peabody Coal and who is now serving a 10.5-month jail sentence in the federal penitentiary, but too late for the mountaintops. Because together in that dark room, they hatched a plan where they rewrote the interpretation of one word of the Clean Water Act, the definition of the word fill, to change 30 years of statutory interpretation and to make it legal for the first time, to effectively overrule Judge Hayden's decision and make it legal, to to dump rock, debris, rubble, garbage, any solid material into any waterway of the United States without a Clean Water Act permit. And this is why I always say, wherever you see coal, you'll see the subversion of our democracy. You'll see the destruction of the democracy at the local level, the disappearance of planning boards, the disappearance of zoning laws. They don't have those anymore in West Virginia. You can't. If you live in West Virginia, you don't have the power as a local person to zone out mountaintop removal mining. They just tell you we're going to do it. You don't have property rights anymore. They can go onto your property and plow it under the ground, and you have no right to object. There's no transparency left in government. Everything is done in secret, and then you'll see the subversion you'll see the capture of the agencies that are supposed to protect the rest of us from pollution. They become the sock puppets for the industries that they're supposed to regulate, and you'll see the corruption of politicians. In West Virginia, 85% of the people, according to every poll, wants to see mountaintop removal mining ended completely and forever. But not a single politician in the state will say that publicly, and no newspaper will take that position. They subvert the press as well. So if you let coal here, what you're doing is you're letting that happen in West Virginia and the Powder Ridge Basin. But you're also letting the camel's nose under the tent right here in Portland. Because when coal comes into your community, it's going to start undermining everything that you love, everything that you value, including your children's health, and everything that makes you proud to be American. So you are on the front lines of this battle. What we've done by suing this industry and by building power plants where we can create solar energy and wind, and there are now, incidentally, more people employed in the United States of America in the solar industry than there are as coal miners. There are 86,000 coal miners in America, 96,000 people employed by the solar industry, and 70,000 people employed by wind. So within 2 years, wind is going to have more people than the coal industry. We're beating them, and we're forcing them to pay for their mercury, and we're forcing them to internalize their costs, their ozone particulates, and their acid rain, and ultimately their carbon as well. So they need to get out of our country. We've closed the water keepers, Sierra Club, and NRDC, 40 major proposals for coal plants in this country in the last 2 years. In Toronto, Mark Matson has helped get the government of Toronto make a commitment to end all coal, and they blew up the last coal plant about a year ago. They just blew it up. And we know how evil coal is, and we're going to get rid of it in our country. So what are they going to do? They need to stay in business, as the Chinese water keepers just told you, and what they're going to do is they're going to say, we still need to sell this coal. We can't sell it to America, because they know what the story is. So now we're going to sell it to China. And the place that they're going to pick, that they desperately need, is the Columbia River Basin, to put all their terminals, and they're going to ship it through your neighborhoods, and they're going to corrupt your politicians and poison your children and give you cancer if you let them. And I would ask you, are you going to let them do this to your community? If you do it, they will destroy everything. This is the most beautiful, and you guys all know this. You don't want people to know it because you don't want them moving here, but this is the best city in the country. It's got the highest quality of life. And if the coal industry has its way, this city is going to look like West Virginia, where you cannot drink water, groundwater, in the state of West Virginia without poisoning yourself. And your politicians don't represent you, they represent the bad guys. And you know what? Somebody from the local press called me yesterday and said, well, this is going to bring jobs to the state. And I said, yeah, that's what they always say. But they're not going to bring jobs to this state. The whole strategy of this industry over the past 30 years has been a ruthless, merciless, deliberate, and systematic strategy to rid their industry of human being jobs and replace them with explosives and big machines. And they are not coming here to bring you prosperity and jobs. They're coming to ship their poison so that they can poison the people in China. And that poison is going to come back here and poison your salmon and your children. So don't let it happen. Thank you.